our high sales tax, all the taxes?
Well, one thing that is coming up shortly is, I believe it's September 18th, we are going to be getting a ballot initiative for folks to sign. And this can be anybody that's enrolled as a voter. And do you realize that the gas tax that's in place right now is actually tied to the CPI?
Yes.
So although we needed some money in for revenue presently, this is something that's going to go on indefinitely. And it's tied to the consumer price index.
Isn't it like taxation without representation? Because they can simply keep it going up and there's nothing we can say. It's not like we can vote it incrementally. It's just going to go up.
It sounds like you're going to start a revolution with that.
So what this ballot initiative will be, and people can start signing the sheets, I believe, as soon as September 18th, and we will all be out in force at local shopping areas and whatnot, asking folks for their signature for this, as long as they're a registered voter. But it will put a stop to it being tied to the CPI, that it will only be a tax to fill whatever the void was presently, not for this to go on indefinitely.
Now, who's leading this referendum? Is this a Republican-led
Yes,
initiative?
I would say that it's Republicans. I mean, I've been at several meetings, and it's a few people on state committee that have led the charge, I think.
But it doesn't really matter who it is, right?
No, it doesn't. It's anybody that has a pocketbook.
It really
that's
doesn't.
having the cash pulled out of the pocketbook.
And I don't think it's just a strictly Republican issue. I've talked to many of my friends who are Democrats or unenrolled. No one that I know agrees with this whole gas tax linked to inflation, and people are anxious to have it overturned. So I don't think it's a strictly Republican issue with this particular ballot
initiative. It isn't.
initiative.
I mean, everybody needs a car. I mean, that's no longer a luxury.
I'd like to see the language in this initiative, just because I'm curious how they would stop. Would they just stop the tax altogether, as in repeal the tax, or is this some kind of limitation on the tax, sort of like Proposition 2.5 was on property taxes? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, my understanding of it is that there was a shortfall and they needed to find revenue. And so they've gone after, maybe David can speak to this better.
Well,
go ahead, jump in.
I mean, they sold it as possibly taking up some of the DOT needs, the Department of Transportation.
Right.
But there was never any guarantee tied to this recent tax increase that would bring the money over to the Department of Transportation. So people bought it as being there to fix their roads and bridges.
Right.
But it will go back through general budget like previous tax increases have.
It's not going to be set aside.
And will not. And it will go right back up to the MBTA. It'll go right back up to fixing the buses and the railroad up in Boston, but it will never touch
for
our
pensions,
cities.
for example,
Exactly.
if they needed it for pensions.
It'll have nothing to do with our Department of Transportation when the general budget gets done with it.
So the money is not sequestered, so to speak.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's not.
And it's
But
perpetual.
my question was regarding the referendum. In other words, we have a referendum, but what does the referendum do? It just it sort of says, okay, this vote, it's like the vote didn't happen, but only.
No,
I mean,
my understanding of it, and that's what I think I was trying to explain, is that it is to fill a need presently, that there is a revenue shortfall presently. But when you talk about the CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index, and that's something that, you know, monetarily goes along at the, you know, Federal Reserve and all those
That's right.
financial people like set the Consumer Price Index. That's something that will go up with inflation and whatnot. So that will continue on indefinitely.
So
the Republicans are saying, okay, we understand that we needed some revenue. So how do we get that? We go to people and it's a tax.
Right.
That's how that's how a government functions.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
But
Go ahead. If I may just interject, we had $600 million surplus in taxes this year, in tax revenue. So I don't know how they're playing
but
up
that's not the argument, David. The argument is that they agree that this was needed for whatever reason.
For transportation.
Right.
And somehow we're supposed to link gas consumption
Yes.
to transportation.
But should it end? It's like paying for tolls on the Mass Pike.
Indefinitely.
How many years have we
Yes.
paid for the Mass Pike to be built?
Right.
You know, the Mass Pike was built in what, the 30s probably? And
right.
we're now in the 2000s.
Just paying for
And we're
maintenance.
still paying for the building of the Mass Pike.
Right.
And so it's the same type of thing. People don't realize that this could have been placed upon us for a temporary time frame, and yet the way the legislation went through, it's now permanent.
So this will unlink it from the CPI.
Okay,
And that
that
way,
was
if
my
they, and
question.
if they want more, they want to raise the gas tax again,
Okay.
they'll have to come back like they should.
Okay.
And vote on it.
Okay.
And stand up behind their vote. So
Instead of tax in perpetuity, right?
that's right.
It
Perpetual,
is
right.
tax now across the board for whatever amount, but it's not linked.
It's not linked to the CPI,
CPI.
so that's
It,
right.
it seems wrong to me, inherently wrong, as it does, I'm sure, to most
It
people.
sure
but
does.
Yeah.
That's why we think we'll probably fill up these sheets quickly.
And at the same time, maybe this is an opportunity to give out information on the Republican Party.
There are some legislators who are contemplating repealing the entire bill because it is regressive. Think about the people from Taunton, from Fall River that have to drive 50 and 60 miles to work.
That's
They don't
true.
want to hear about a 3-cent per gallon tax added on, even if it is not tied to the CPI. They don't need to deal with that when they're driving to Woburn, back and forth every single day.
That's
Yeah.
right. And think about who the gas tax, think about not just people driving to work, but all the small businesses, the delivery men, people delivering
Absolutely.
oil, delivering products. All this, the gas tax just cuts
Hurts
into
them.
more of those profits. Do they have to
Gouges
lay
them.
off another employee? Certainly they can't hire an employee.
Right.
They're already not hiring full-time employees because of all the Obamacare regulations.
Exactly.
Now this puts even more pressure on them in a time when our economy is still struggling. So.
Who ultimately pays it anyway? The consumer.
Right.
Let's face it. After the transportation costs are increased, they'll just pass it off to the
Pass it
consumer.
back.
And the fact that it's not set aside specifically for transportation tells you something,
Right.
right?
I tell you, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was just another way to reach into our pockets, and we don't need that until they clean up the waste and fraud up north.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think what we as Republicans, and why David probably ran, and why Mark and I try to help candidates that are running, is that we want parity up on Beacon Hill. We want to be able to have some balance up there. When it's 80% one party, you can't have parity.
But don't the Democrats stand up for the little guy, Patricia?
Speaking of a little guy,
Feet on the street. And we'll get
Feet
to
on the
that
street.
when we come back. Thank you, David.
you're welcome.
Hey, how you doing? This is Pete Mazzone from the Right Side TV, and we're here on Martha's Vineyard today. Got to take a little flight. It's been delayed about an hour and a half because the president is in town, but that's okay. He needs his security. But I wore my, just in case we do see him, I wore my "How you doing, Barry" hat today, little Martha's Vineyard souvenir. And we're going to fly in a 1941 Waco UPS 7. It's a biplane, bright red. I am excited as all hell. So let's go up and see if we can see what the president's doing on his visit to the island, and hope we get back to the ground in one piece. Okay, here we are at the Katama airstrip. We're waiting to get the word that Barry is through with his playtime. Barry, maybe Bo the dog, but we have a no-fly zone situation going on here until Mr. President is done with his vacation for the moment. So we're waiting to ride in our 1941 Waco UPS 7, and looking forward to it. 220 horsepower, 7-cylinder engine, and just ready to get off the ground. Like I said, I'm wearing my Welcome to Martha's Vineyard Barry hat, and I hope he likes it. Now, President Obama was on the island, and this is a Secret Service agent. He's calling me into the FBI to make sure I pass clearance. And I guess I did. I guess they didn't think I was very threatening, so they're letting me take a ride in the same airspace as President Obama. Here I am being told to climb up into the plane, and of course I was going to do it. I was determined. Now, I'm not about to have a nice young girl tell me to do something and then have me tell her that the old man just can't do it. It's not going to happen. So here I am getting ready to go. I wonder if Snoopy started out this way. Let's get into the air. Oh, this thing has 220 horsepower, 7 cylinders. It was built in 1941 as a training plane, and my controls were disconnected. Off we go into the wild blue yonder. And we are going to head out now, and we are going to check out South Beach. Here's South Beach in the Katama portion of Martha's Vineyard. over there on the left. The president had been there earlier in the day. Here is the Winnetou Hotel and Resort, built by my friend Bobby Adams here in Taunton. He spent 3 years out there building that beautiful thing. We flew over the homes of David Letterman and Meg Ryan, but we weren't invited in for lunch. And here we are. We're going to check out the wreck of the Myrtle B. Crowley. This was a six-masted schooner. The Crowley was sunk in a gale here in 1910, just off the shore of Martha's Vineyard. And you can see that little dot in the top center of your screen. That is all that is left. Now here we are at the Chappaquiddick Bridge, the site of the tragic accident that Senator Kennedy was involved in so many years ago. And off on the top there, just above the beach, you can see some little white dots. They were gunboats, again, protecting the president. The military had a very big presence on the island this particular weekend. Here we are back on the ground, and the flight really was 15 minutes long, but this was enough for today. And thank God Almighty, I'm on the ground at last. Here I am with Mike Credo, the pilot, and thank you to Alicia Koulis for her camera work, and again to Mike Credo, the pilot and owner and manager of Classic Aviators Limited, and that is a wrap.
Welcome back to The Right Side, and we're here talking about politics, which is some of our favorite topics for some of us here. Politics and the people who sit around eating chocolate cookies and bonbons on the couch during election times, right? Isn't that what the state committee does? David, can you describe what does the state committee do and what did they do for you?
Oh, let me describe how they helped us. It's all well and good to talk about campaigns that are in the news, you know, whether it be city council, state rep, U.S. Congress, things like that we're familiar with. But there are campaigns going on all the time that these two people worked so hard to win. And that's part of the layers, the buildup of our organization. The Republican Party needs that organization in order to become more and more effective. And we reach out to state committee people like Patty and Mark to help coalesce the troops and get things done. We reach out to them all the time to reach out to other people to let them know we're in a campaign. And I'll tell you, I bet they could both explain where they're from and how important it is, because oftentimes people don't realize how much goes into being a state committee person and how much they can affect campaigns.
Are you saying that state committee people help organize campaigns?
That's
Is that
not
what
all
you're
they
saying?
do. I'll let Patty.
Well, first of all, I want to say that David's campaign manager is also one of our colleagues,
She is.
State Committee woman Becky Levesque from Freetown, and she did an excellent job,
Awesome job,
for
yes.
David. And then Mark and I and a few other state committee people went down and augmented and helped on the campaign. But the state committee is made up of 80 people. We're elected within the party. So it's always at the presidential primary time frame that we are voted on, in or out or whatever. We might have a primary. And we serve for 4 years. And we have a district that aligns with the Senate districts in the state. So there are 40 state Senate districts in the state, and there are 80 state committee people because there's a committee man and a committee woman. And that's not
It's
really
nice that they
well.
do it
It is
that
nice.
way.
It's not really intended to be like a sexist thing
Gender
or anything.
parity?
No, it really goes. And the Democrats in the state handle this similarly. It really was instituted after women got the vote way back in the 20s, and they did feel that it might be overbalanced.
Helpful.
Yes, that it would always be men running and it would always be men at the state committee. So there's 40 state committee men and 40 state committee women. And so we each have a district. And
I
those
was going to
districts are
ask you, how many
drawn by
people are in
population.
your community? How many communities do you have in your district?
I have a large district. I align with State Senator Richard Ross, who happens to be a Republican, and I have Norfolk, Bristol, Middlesex, and so I have 3 counties,
Okay.
and my district goes from Wayland to Attleboro. So I have 11 towns and a portion of Attleboro, which is a city. And, again,
But
there are
I
people.
can say from experience during that U.S. Congress race that I had, this woman knows no boundaries. She was all over the place because the
In a
congressional
positive
district-
way.
Oh, in many ways, in many ways. I'm sure we could find out about her times at PC at Brad's. But up and down the congressional district, Patty was everywhere all the time. And I'm
try.
sure Mark does a lot of that, and that's exactly the kind of
That's
people,
where the
they are
swimming
the
keeps up your
unsung,
energy.
unsung heroes of our party that go out
Thank you.
and are everywhere making things happen, just
And
as
they
Becky.
don't sit around and eat bonbons?
We don't. I mean, my district is the first Plymouth and Bristol, and that includes Taunton. That aligns with Mark Pacheco's district. So I have 8 towns in one city, the city of Taunton. And but it's true. I think most of us not only get involved, obviously, deeply in our own districts, but we're helping outside the districts, especially in special elections. I was out in Fall River with David. I was up in Worcester with Carol Claros. I think you were as well.
No,
And,
David and I are Providence College alumni, so my allegiance was with this guy.
Well,
Don't forget Pete, he's back there. It's like an alumni reunion.
That's right. I know many of us were, and we all, we all
You
work
help out
very
where you
hard.
can,
Yes.
is
And
basically
I think
what
it's
you're
important for
saying.
people to know that we're non-salaried individuals. There's no
absolutely.
compensation for our position. We're
It's-
just party
it's an
activists who
elected
care deeply about the Republican
leadership
Party.
position, but it's volunteer.
That's
So
right.
it's a state organization that is intended to shore up elections of
And to find candidates and to support the candidates. It's the Board of Trustees almost of the Mass
That's a
GOP.
good way of putting it.
Okay.
And that's when we go out and we listen to the Republican Town Committees, or RTCs as we call them, as an acronym. And we
So-
try to find people to even run for selectman or a treasurer in town or town clerk.
You people are in the perfect position to try to help when there is a primary and there is a winner, and we do need to sort of rally behind somebody. It seems like you
Yes,
guys are.
and I pride myself because I met David in a very contested primary in my district. He was running for Congress. And he had a much larger district. His run overlapped my district. But there were 3 Republicans in that race. And they were 3 Republicans that came
qualified.
from very divergent philosophical thoughts.
But yet they were very qualified, all three of them.
oh, absolutely.
And may I add, we became good friends all through that primary.
Absolutely. But as
Yeah.
state committee woman, with all this going on in my district and having to promote all 3 candidates, I pride myself on not being partial to one or the other as we're going through a primary. And then whoever the pick might be, we then have to support that person.
Right.
That's right. And
But
bringing-
during the primary time frame, if David needs help or wants to know that something's going on in my area, I keep him informed as much as I did the other 2 candidates.
Right.
That's right. It's very important to bring everybody together. I live in Carver, and I'm also the vice chairman of the Plymouth County Republican Club. And one of the things we do every 2 years in September after the primary is we have a unity breakfast for everyone in Plymouth County. And we bring all the candidates together, all their
It's famous,
supporters
by the
together.
way. Yeah.
It is relatively famous. And
is.
And it's something I think we'd like to see copied throughout the state.